John Crawford was shot and killed on August 5th, and the following week there was a community meeting called locally in Dayton, and then the next day we had a follow-up meeting, and people were ready to go and energized and ready to start planning things. That Thursday we had a candlelight vigil in front of Walmart, mourning the deaths of both Angela Williams and John Crawford, and anyone else who's been killed in the last couple years by police brutality. And that was an amazing turnout. There were probably 200 plus people there, and we only had 48 hours to plan that event. So I think that just goes to show that people are ready to move on this. And then that Saturday, 2 days later, we had a protest here at the Beavercreek Police Department. We did a walk from about a mile down. We walked here, a silent march, and we had tape over our mouths that said, "Release the tape," because they had not released the tape yet. At this point, it's 2 weeks after the shooting, and the family has been requesting to see the tape, and they haven't seen it yet. So that was our only message at that point, was release the tape. We came here and we did that, so that was on a Saturday. And then the following Monday, there was another action at Mike DeWine's office in Columbus, also demanding release the tape. The next day, he called an emergency press conference and said that he had released 6 minutes of the tape to the family. And so after the family saw the tape, they changed their narrative, and they were ready to take a lot more action, because what they saw was their son being murdered unjustly, unfairly, unprovoked. And so they wanted to get the feds involved. They wanted the Department of Justice to come in, because now that they knew what they saw, they had no faith in Mike DeWine's BCI, investigatory body, to hold a fair trial and really get justice. And so I think that following week we had an action at the federal building in downtown Dayton, demanding that the feds get involved, and that we didn't have faith in Mike DeWine because he's from Greene County. He has stock in Walmart and has a long-term relationship with the Beavercreek Police Department. And so Mike DeWine had a press conference the next week, I think, after that, and he addressed the fact that we were saying, that he addressed openly that he is from Greene County and should not be over this investigation. So he created a grand jury, decided to put together a grand jury, and to put Mark Pietmeyer as the prosecutor over that grand jury. And his line was, "Oh, well, Pietmeyer's not from Greene County, and I am, so he's better than me for this job," right? So we do a little bit of research, and we find out that Mark Pietmeyer was over the Timothy Thomas case in Cincinnati, where a 16-year-old boy was murdered by the police. There was no charge in that at the end, and that ended up in infamous race riots in Cincinnati. He was also over the Steubenville rape case and the Lucasville riots case in the Lucasville prisons, neither of which have ended up in justice. And so, we still had no faith in that grand jury. The next action after that, we planned to put pressure during the grand jury. So the grand jury was on September 22nd. And so we did an 11.5-mile walk from the Walmart where he was killed to Xenia, where the grand jury was being held. And we had about 85 people complete that walk. When we reached the courthouse, there were probably 100 more there to greet us. And we actually ended up staying in Xenia for 3 days from there. We stayed at a local church in Xenia right around the corner. And the purpose of that was just to put attention on this grand jury. Let the grand jury know that people nationally are paying attention and want justice for John Crawford and aren't just going to let this go. And so on the third day in the morning, we had heard that there was going to be an announcement, like the announcement of whatever came out of the grand jury. We weren't allowed to know where they were holding it. They held it at a secret location instead of at the courthouse. But we found our way there. And so there were about 10 of us there in presence. And Mark Pietmeyer was there, and he sat there for 20 minutes basically defending the police officer. He was acting more like a defendant than a prosecutor. His job is to prosecute, but he was just sitting there defending. And he showed us the training manual that the police had been trained 2 weeks prior to the shooting on how to act in an active shooter situation. And the funny thing is that John Crawford was not an active shooter. But the way that the police responded was as if he was an active shooter, based on the 911 caller. And so after that, we called emergency meetings that night. We called an emergency meeting in Dayton, and we called one in Columbus. And out of the Dayton meeting, I think there were over 100 people there at that meeting, and it was a time for us to all kind of come together. A lot of us were really hurt, not necessarily shocked, but hurt by the no indictment. And so we kind of came together as a group and talked about actions that we could take and solutions to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And those are very wide and broad and range pretty far. Everything from faith communities coming together and having more leadership in situations like this to, examining the police training, this active shooter thing, and like if they have any kind of diversity training or if they ever talk about implicit bias and as police officers and stuff like that. So there were many different things that came out of that meeting. The next action we took was we came here and we demanded a meeting. It was on a Friday. We came and demanded a meeting with the police chief, Dennis Evers, and we had 3 demands for him. One was fire Sean Williams, or at least disarm him. The second one was hold 911 caller Ronald Ritchie accountable. And then the third one was completely get rid of that active shooter training and put it with something that recognizes all of the race-based shootings that have been happening by police. We think that their training needs to take all of that into account, and implicit bias and everything like that. So those were our 3 demands. Dennis Evers said that he would give us a meeting for the following week and that he would call us on Monday to let us know exactly what time and what day. So we came back here first thing in the morning, Monday morning, to greet them, let them know we didn't go anywhere, we're still here. And then we proceeded to have a lock-in at this police station until the meeting. The meeting was Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So we stayed here from Monday until Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And then Wednesday at 1 o'clock, we had probably about 100 people inside of this police station while we were in the meeting. The meeting was really long, and what came out of the meeting was that, what they said was that they don't have the power to grant us any of our demands. The truth is that in order to fire Sean Williams, the first step is a recommendation which has to come from the police chief. There's a long process because he is a public employee, I guess, and so it is a long process, but his hands are not as tied as he was making it seem. As far as the 911 caller goes, he said that it was Mike DeWine's BCI during their investigation who decided that not to charge the 911 caller, Ronald Ritchie. And then the police training, he said that is also under Mike DeWine. So that came out of that. After the meeting, we did not like the answer, and so we sat outside of this door and blocked it and shut down the police station. that evening. They closed their doors and locked them like 2 or 3 hours before they normally close. After that, we have had a series of community meetings to see what people locally want to do on the statewide level. So after that happened, that was on a Wednesday, and then that weekend we had people go down to Ferguson. And actually there were 3 Walmarts shut down in Ferguson that weekend in solidarity with John Crawford. And then the following weekend we had an action at the State House in Columbus with the same demands, but it also brought together people who are fighting for justice in Palestine, people who are fighting for undocumented workers' rights, farm workers' rights, and all these different groups who, really connecting all of these issues and bringing together all of our allies. So now there have been a series of events. People on the ground here are ready to act. So this action was organized by someone individually who decided that she was fed up and wanted to do something. So I'm just here to support that and, see how we can continue to have direct actions like this just for the purpose of letting people know that we haven't forgotten and that we're still here.